Deputy Leader, the meeting's now started.
Thank you. Welcome all to the Cabinet meeting of Wednesday, the 12th of May, and usually on a Wednesday for us. If I could remind everyone present that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and that this recording will be archived for future viewing, and this will be the shape of things to come, and really pleased that it will be so. If I can move on to the agenda for today. First thing on the agenda is apologies for absence, and I need to give apologies for the leader today. I'll be chairing the meeting. He's unavoidably detained elsewhere, so that's his. I think everyone else is here as far as I'm aware. So we can move on to agenda item 2, minutes of the last meeting. And can I take those as a fair reflection or true reflection of the meeting?
Yeah, formally second, Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Councillor. Great. Moving on to agenda item 3, we have declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations today? No. Obviously, we do have agenda item 8, which is consideration of senior management structure within the council. And although our staff employees don't have to declare an interest, they will obviously be leaving the meeting at that point with purely cabinet support staff to support the meeting. The Managing Director would like to come in at that point.
Yeah, I was going to suggest, Deputy Leader, that we possibly move that agenda item to the end of the meeting with your permission. So then we can be present for the other agenda items and then leave at that point, if that's okay with you, yourself and Cabinet members.
Super. Thanks, Rob. I think that would be an absolutely super idea. So yes, it's marked up on my agenda. I haven't got round to that bit, but yes, we'll move that to the end of the agenda, and then all staff can leave at that point. So moving on again to agenda item 4, we've got 3 references that have come back to us from various committees. The first one being a reference from Homes and Safe Communities Scrutiny on the 14th of April. Cabinet referred a report, an update report on a gypsy and traveller site search to them on the 22nd of March. And it was an interesting and full discussion that it had been sent to them for exploration, for further consideration, and it was the exploration of a site for a gypsy and traveller facility, and which proposed another report to come back to Cabinet in the future after the next stage. So I said there were a range of areas brought up which are outlined in the reference. And then if we go on to the recommendations that came from the committee, they asked that Cabinet further investigate other alternatives. Well, I think the report laid out quite comprehensively the level of search that had gone on to that date. Investigate the feasibility of constructing an alternative emergency access at the current gypsy traveller site. Well, obviously, the feasibility work that is proposed within that would undertake exploration of access to the site, and that Cabinet reports considers the comments from Homes and Safe Community Scrutiny Committee, and we very much have done. We've it said it's a full and comprehensive reference which we have taken on board. So I think that really from that perspective, it's for Cabinet to note this report, and I would therefore so move.
Yeah, and I second that, Chair. I think that it's important to note there are going to be a number of points along the development where the public will be involved, members will be involved, and in the sense the site being potentially located is the beginning of a journey of working with all parties, and certainly that the comments here won't be lost, and encourage everybody to continue to engage at different stages of the consultation.
Thank you. Is everyone happy with that? Oh, Councillor Williams, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I just wanted to concur that we recognised that there were cabinet members at the scrutiny meeting as well, so we were able to listen to the views of the scrutiny committee and the representatives from residents as well. It's, as we know, there's quite a lot of discussion and points raised, and many of them have been dealt with by the officers. But this is, as Councillor Grace just pointed out, it's a step forward. So I'm pleased that we're going to make some progress on it.
Excellent. So that's fine. We're going to note that. Moving on to agenda item 5. This is another reference, and this is from Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee on the 20th of April. And again, in that busy cabinet meeting on 22nd of March, we had asked for the report on Project Zero, the draft climate change challenge plan, to be referred to them as part of the consultation programme. A very interesting meeting with a whole wide range of contributions from members of the committee, which are laid out in the reference. And they came up with a number of areas that they wanted Cabinet to consider, and it was things like the consultation should be as far-reaching as possible. I think we totally agree with that. Consideration be given to extending the consultation deadline past this 11th of May. I think even at scrutiny it was made clear, because again quite a few of the Cabinet members were present at that meeting, that this consultation is actually, this discussion over this really crucial area is going to be ongoing, but you do have to have certain points within the time frame to allow you to consolidate that feedback in order to construct other reports and keep the conversation going. So yes, we would go in that. Discussions about transport links, looking at planning process, electric vehicle charging points, offsetting carbon footprints, and something very topical about future flooding and coastal erosion events. So I think that all Cabinet members present very much took that on board. I know that it's also gone to other committees, certainly went to corporate performance and resources, which I understand was even more wide-ranging discussion there. So I look forward to that reference coming back. So I think on that Cabinet can note this this reference, and it will feed into the consultation itself. So is that okay with everyone? Ben, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, formally second that, Chair. I think also, as you say, just to reiterate, this is about a step change in how we approach everything, and it's a journey, not a single event, and we need to move forward. We've set some challenging goals on ourselves, and I think this is part of that, and absolutely all those views will be taken on board as we move forward. So second those. Thank you.
And everyone else happy? Yeah. Thumbs and nodding heads, that's good. As we move on to agenda item 6, this is a reference from Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee on 21st of April. And this is to do with developing sort of scrutiny within the council, and the term is fit for the future. A wide range of different documents that were sent to scrutiny for consideration, and they discussed it fully. That would be available in their minutes. But what they have recommended to us is that the Public Engagement Action Plan, which was Appendix B to their report, be recommended to Cabinet for approval. That the revised Cabinet and Scrutiny Roles and Responsibilities document, which was Appendix C to their report, be referred to Cabinet for approval and for uploading to the Council's website. And thirdly, that the revised Scrutiny Public Participation Guide, which was Appendix G to their report, be recommends to Cabinet for consideration and to full council for approval. So that scrutiny have I just need to check the democratic officer. Scrutiny can refer to full council. Do we have to refer it to full council? Can somebody advise me on that?
Yes, I'd recommend that you refer it to full council.
We will refer it to full council. So therefore, can I move that Cabinet approve those various appendices and that we refer the revised scrutiny public participation guide to full council?
Formally second.
Thank you. Right. Please hang on while I changed documents on my computer. This is digital technology as we speak. And then we move on to agenda item 7, which is the Local Access Forum. It's a report of their recent meeting. As Councillor Williams is chair of that committee, I'll hand over to him for his comments.
Yes, often when we get a report like this, it's sorry, can you hear me all right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Often when we get a report like this, it can be overlooked. Some of the work that's been carried out over the last year or so, you know, the parks and public right of way have all been continued to be maintained, even though there have been some restriction. And we found at some points actually that we'll probably be using them more. So I just wanted, you know, members to be aware that there is quite a lot of work that's been going on, and for them to spend some time just going through the report, particularly as it's across the Vale, and there's been, you know, things like the coastal access, there's been funding being drawn in and things like that. So I just wouldn't want to just pass just as a reference on that point. Okay, thank you.
Super. And so, Eddie, you
reports, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll second. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Moving on to agenda item 9, and this is, I think this has been a much awaited report because it's been much discussed, is about the Penarth Pier Pavilion and providing an update to Cabinet on the return of Penarth Pier Pavilion to the local authority, what's happened since, and then considerations for the future. It's actually a very comprehensive report, and my thanks to officers for their work on this. So if we have a sort of a whistle-stop tour of the report, I think, because it's so comprehensive. First of all, we've got the background to the pavilion, even going back to, you know, when it was first opened, the pier itself, and also then the pavilion, how it was renovated in 2012, 2013. I was delighted at that time to take part in the celebrations of it winning National Pier of the Year. But then in late 2020, it became necessary to lead discussions with PACL and the National Lottery organisations to ensure the building remained available for the people of Penarth and the wider Vale of Glamorgan. Those discussions completed in late February, and the council formally took over the operations of the pavilion following the novation of funding agreements from PACL in March. That's the sort of legal terminology for taking it back over. And I think it's fair to say that the council's aim throughout all those negotiations was to ensure that the pavilion could be returned for community use. So I think it's you know, it was laid out that the council actually made a payment to PACL to make sure that the contents of the pavilion remained and weren't lost, which meant that it could reopen as soon as possible, and that also as part of the negotiations, honouring the existing bookings in the pavilion was also agreed. Looking at paragraph 2, particularly sort of 2.2 onwards on page 6, that looks about the work undertaken to date since taking it back over, and there's been quite a lot of sort of maintenance and updating work done. and then a bit of discussion about Big Fresh Catering Company that have taken over the cafe and have to say have bacon rolls to die for. But a little bit about sort of Big Fresh. It allowed us to open quickly and speedily, but also as a team, it's a not for private profit venture, which means that they do support the pavilion, but they also support the school meal service through their trading. And I think that a lot of people who've visited the cafe and got to talk to them about how it all works have actually been very supportive. So there are lots of proposals in terms of how it goes forward, as the pavilion itself will be able to reopen as COVID legislation allows. That there are proposals and some ideas for that are laid out later in sort of paragraph 218 and a few paragraphs afterwards. And then towards developing a plan for the future, well, there was recently a consultation, over 1,000 responses, which is phenomenal for a response for the council, and a lot of considerations there in terms of, I mean, obviously cinema is very much at the top of the list for a lot of people in Penarth, but then also, you know, how the cafe is used, opportunities for socialising. Are there classes? Are there going to be events and music, that sort of thing? So we're already applying for an events and alcohol licence to allow some of those sorts of events to go forward. Obviously, from a financial perspective, we know that we've had to make expenditure for to do the maintenance, etc., and get things ready to reopen, and we need to get that onto a solid financial basis. So there will be a need for a business plan to be developed in relation to the outcomes of the consultation, but also in relation to how we meet the financial obligations linked to such a premise. And so the financial considerations are laid out in section 4, mainly paragraph 4.1 and going on. But I think it's fair to say that we need to work towards the pavilion being on a sound financial basis, because if we don't, the building will be at risk. That with the demands of public sector, local government finances, that anything that is not core business has to be reviewed on an annual basis. So we need to work incredibly hard to make sure that the pavilion is sustainable through being financially viable. And you know, it will be a challenge, but we will be working along with the views of the public of Penarth in terms of what they want for that pavilion, and to make sure that it has a long and successful life ahead of it. So the recommendations, and I know that people will want to make comments on this, the recommendations that we have before us is that it is firstly recommended that Cabinet notes the contents of this report. Secondly, it's recommended that Cabinet approves the development of a business plan, including the identification of appropriate funding to support the future operation of the Penarth Pier Pavilion as described in the report. 3, that it is recommended that Cabinet approves the operation of Penarth Pier Pavilion should be overseen by the Learning and Skills Directorate in recognition of the synergies between this building and the Council's arts, culture and learning services. It's recommended that Cabinet approves the inclusion in the capital programme 2021-2022 a scheme entitled Penarth Pier Pavilion to be funded by the Building Fund. 5, it is recommended that Cabinet delegates authority to the Head of Finance in consultation with the Leader and Managing Director to make funds available during the 2021-22 financial year to support the operation of the Pier Pavilion. 6, it is recommended that Cabinet delegates authority to the Managing Director in consultation with the Leader, Deputy Leader, Cabinet Member for Leisure, Arts and Culture and the Head of Finance to develop and implement a charging approach for the use of the pavilion. And finally, it's recommended that Cabinet receives a further update on matters related to Penarth Pier Pavilion in due course. And I'd so move. Catherine, you have your hand up.
Yes, I do. It's okay, couldn't get myself off mute then. Yes, I mean, I wanted to say, obviously, as the ward member for the pavilion and the Cabinet member for Leisure, Arts and Culture, that I really welcome this report. As an individual who lives in Penarth, I was obviously equally as concerned as to what was going on, so it's really reassuring and heartwarming to know that we have got this building back. The report's really welcome because it explains exactly how much work we had to do to be able to achieve this. And I'm so grateful for all the members of the public who got involved in the consultation, because we all know that the building is really important in the hearts of the people in Penarth, as it is to all of us. I think what I would like to say right now at this moment is that, as Liz has referred to, we need to make sure that this is sustainable going forward. And I think that while we've had loads of conversations with lots of different people, we just need to be a little bit patient to make sure that we have that plan in place. And as and when we can literally bang our drums and make big noises about what we're going to do down there, then we will do so. But until that point, we're here and we are listening, and we will formulate that plan to make sure the building stays as beautiful as it is. And I'm really, really happy that people are going to get a chance to actually see the Arts in Isolation collection that we did through lockdown, which I know helped a lot of artists and people to get through those really difficult times. It'll be lovely to be able to see that in the building itself. So thank you so much.
Super. Ben, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd formally second the recommendations that you laid out. And I think it was important to take through the whole report, because I think it's very easy to just see the pavilion through the lens of one viewpoint or one point in time. And actually, it's been a long journey. And I think what the underlying feeling from all of the consultation responses is there's a passion for it to work, and people have a lot of ideas as to what they'd like to do. And so that's why I think moving forwards, the business plan and development plan is going to be so crucial. And I look forward to further updates here at Cabinet as they're brought about. In terms of the council's involvement, I'm really pleased that, in light of the challenging trading activity ability for the pavilion, but also the way that things have been handed over, that the council's been in a position to step up and preserve this. And as you say, taking on fixtures and fittings might seem a small item, but at a time when so many parts of the council and the officers are working hard on a COVID response, the idea of procuring and refitting and putting back into walls fixtures and fittings that have been stripped to fund stuff it just doesn't bear thinking about, and we certainly wouldn't be where we are now. I'd like to thank all the staff who've opened this so quickly, and not to plug one particular business above another, but it is great to see people being able to go onto the pier and access at least what they're able to under current restrictions. So I look forward to how it's going to develop going forwards, and I think all of us have always wanted what's best for the pier, and the reason why everyone is so passionate about what's been going on is because they care so much. And I hope with this report people can begin to understand why there's possibly been a little bit of radio silence from some parties as we wanted to get this right. We needed to work with the National Lottery, and it's great that the council have got that agreement to move forwards, and I look forward to the next part of the development.
Super, thanks, Ben. Yeah, I very much echo that. I think it has to be recognised that if you wouldn't normally choose the middle of a pandemic to undertake such an exercise, would you? You know, it's not the sort of thing that you would normally plan in. And I think I very much echo your thoughts in that so much of the senior leadership team's time put into turning this around, and I think our huge thanks to them, and if that could be minuted. But also, I think what this demonstrates is the absolute commitment of this cabinet to putting this building onto a sustainable footing. And I very much look forward to bringing forward future reports. And I know Catherine and I are looking forward to working jointly on this to actually get a solid business plan together for the building. So yes, so on that note, we're all happy to agree those. Thanks all. So we'll move on to agenda item 10, which is the renewal of the Microsoft Enterprise Agreement 2021 to 2024. And this is to obtain approval for delegated powers to tender and award a contract for the supply of licenses for Microsoft software. It's one of those things you sort of say, well, you know, surely this is housekeeping. Well, yes, we had an agreement which has run out that we need to replace. And I think it's fair to say that the level of digital transformation within the council in the last year has been phenomenal. And the upgrade to Microsoft 365 has actually transformed the way that the organisation has been able to communicate, particularly during the pandemic when the vast majority of colleagues have been working from home. So we're looking for approval to renew the Microsoft Enterprise Agreement via a call-off arrangement under a National Procurement Services Framework Agreement, which unless you're into procurement, all seems a bit sort of unintelligible. And it will enable it to enter into the volume licensing programme for Microsoft software. Approval is also sought to award and enter into a new 3-year call-off contract for the supply of the Microsoft Enterprise Agreement to replace the current 3-year agreement, which expires on the 30th of June 2021. The Microsoft Enterprise Agreement will allow the council to obtain licenses for the use of Microsoft software, which will enable it to continue to benefit from the Office 365 suite of productivity, collaboration and communication tools, such as Outlook, Teams, which we're on now, Forms, Intune for mobiles, etc., etc. So the recommendations before us, which are fairly straightforward, is firstly that delegated authority is granted to the Head of Strategy, Community Learning and Resources to commence a further competition process under National Procurement Services Framework Agreement. That's Ref MPS ICT 0094-19, Lot 3, licensing and subscriptions in order to procure a 3-year call-off contract for the supply of a volume licensing programme under the Microsoft Enterprise Agreement. The delegated authority is granted to the Head of Strategy, Community Learning and Resources in consultation with the Managing Director, the Leader and Head of Finance to award the call-off contract to the successful supplier prior to the expiry of the existing Microsoft Enterprise Agreement on 30th of June 2021. The delegated authority is granted to the Monitoring Officer / Head of Legal and Democratic Services to execute a call-off contract with the successful supplier, together with all other relevant documentation for the provision of the Microsoft Enterprise Agreement and the software licenses pursuant to it. And finally, that a new contract is awarded on the most economically advantageous terms to the council based on 80% cost and 20% quality. I would so move. And I can see a hand up, that's from Ben.
Yeah, myself and Eddie have our hands up. I would say I'm sure that there are colleagues in the council, including those technically supporting our current live stream, who would be able to talk as at length as we did on the Peer Pavilion about the advantages of what the agreement would do. I'm not one of those people, but I do recognise what you say about how much more digital work we're doing, so I'd formally second.
Thank you. Eddie, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I concur. We've come a long way since last year at this point, and this the software and Microsoft, you know, it's one of many, but it's certainly been useful for the council. And hopefully we'll be able to learn more and take advantage of all the other facilities it's got within this package. So let's go forward.
So with that, it's moved and seconded. Is everyone in agreement? Yeah, super. And then we're on to agenda item 11, and I'm delighted to hand over to Councillor King on it. I need a sip of water, who's going to look at policy and fees for placing items on the highway. Over to you, Peter.
Thanks so much, Deputy Leader, Chair for today. Yes, this report seeks the agreement of Cabinet for a new policy for the placing of items on the adopted highway, which includes the footpath. We're moving away from a 3-year licence to a 1-year fee and being more mindful of the space available and required, which will make it more flexible and affordable for our smaller businesses, while going some way to decluttering the spaces. We believe it will make things clearer and safer for pedestrians and drivers and easier for our traders. It also seeks to update our policies regarding skips and scaffolding, but not to alter those costs as they were previously agreed in February. And before I move to the recommendations, I feel I'd like to add by saying how flexible we've been with the usually chargeable highway licenses during the pandemic, issuing over 50 at no charge to assist local businesses to get back on their feet. And I was speaking with one such trader recently, and you know, it was making one almighty difference to his business and his viability. So I'm delighted we've been able to help in that way. So to the recommendations. First of all, that Cabinet approves in principle the proposed policy for neighbourhood services placing equipment on the highway asset as set out in this report and at Appendix A, Annexes 1 and 2 to operate from the 1st of July 2021. That Cabinet approves in principle the proposed policies for skips and scaffolding as set out in this report and at Appendix A, Annexes 3 and 4 to operate from the 1st of July 2021. That Cabinet receives a further report after the 1st of July 2022 to outline how the neighbourhood services placing of equipment on the highways asset policy is working and whether any changes are needed. And that this report, fourth recommendation, this report be referred to the Scrutiny Committee, Environment and Regeneration for their consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, I think this is very relevant, and thank you for mentioning about the situation with street cafe licences. As I said, no charges have been made for the duration of the pandemic, but more than that, actually licences were turned over incredibly quickly, sometimes in a matter of hours, where you know the sort of area outside a premise was inspected, boundaries agreed and marked up, and people could be trading outside their shops or cafes in very quickly. But I think those conversations have been very illuminating, and not all funny, but no, I mean quite illuminating in terms of what are some of the issues. Because I know in one situation we actually moved a waste bin, literally within sort of 24 hours, because if they put chairs and tables outside, somebody would be sitting with their back to a waste bin. Well, nobody really wanted that today. So our officers have been very, very flexible and reflexive for in terms of their response. But it also demonstrated to us how we need to be thinking carefully about, for want of a better word, the clutter on our streets. Because there are people with disabilities, people that need to negotiate them, but also in terms of the social distancing that we've been looking at, that we need to try and minimise that clutter. And I think that there's a conversation that will happen as a result of this report that we can learn from. So I certainly will be at Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny listening in to that conversation. I think I've already spotted it's on the agenda for next week, so that will be good. I'm delighted to second those recommendations. So are we therefore all happy with those? Yeah, super. Right, now I have to negotiate and go back to agenda item 8, and I think we need time for our employees to leave. Tracy, did you want to say something?
Only Liz, just to say I'm just staying in case you've got any questions, and I'll leave when you instruct me to.
In which case, do you want me to just do a little pause and say, I think we're okay now, and then you can leave at that point?
Lovely, Councillor. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for that. So, looking at this report, I mean, the title of it is Consideration of Senior Management Structure within the Council. And I think that what we need to actually think about is that we should take the purpose of the report in with it, because today we are not considering the senior management structure within the council. The report is recommending to us that we should assess the current arrangements leading to senior management in the council for two reasons. One is in the context of the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021, which actually will cause some changes, as well as key learning arising from the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, it's been, it was April 2012 since the last senior management structure review. And while that doesn't in itself mean that there is any specific need or any gaps or failings within our structure, I suppose proven by the performance of the council over the years since then. It's always good to reflect. It's always good to see whether or not we can do things more effectively. And so at the moment where we are is we've just been through, or still partially in, a pandemic, and there's been a lot of learning from that. There's been the learning about our transformation agenda. We've talked about reshaping services, etc. A lot of that has been geared upon cost saving and efficiencies, but actually in some ways it's about being more fleet of foot and more effective going forward. We know more about, as is laid out in our annual delivery plan, the challenges of Project Zero, and also the whole digital transformation agenda. How are we fixed for taking those? How will we be able to deliver against our ambitions with the structure that we've got? And we're provided with an opportunity to do that in some ways, because the changes in legislation under the Local Government and Elections Wales Act also means that we have to look at our structure in terms of whether we have a managing director or a chief executive. And I think that the other thing that we need to look at is that in terms of a lot of the changes in terms of the Government Act to corporate joint committees, there will be a lot more need for both leader, managing director, etc., head of paid service, to be servicing those committees. And how do we do that? So looking at that, the proposal is that we access external expert and independent support to undertake that assessment with us, because sometimes you achieve things far more effectively if you've got an independent set of eyes looking at that. And so that would be our proposal. Looking at an independent consultant, it briefly sets out the process, and if the report is agreed by us, it will be referred on to corporate performance and resources next week, and then it will come back to Cabinet with any subsequent recommendations, should they make any. And in terms of next steps, if agreed, the intention would be to finalise a brief in order to commence that work. And that work would involve discussions with Cabinet, group leaders, although it has to be said that group leaders have already been shown this report and were content with its content. We'd be working with the strategic leadership team directorate, management teams, etc., to assess and consider the key issues for us as an organisation. And as I said earlier, it's in no way a reflection of managers and senior leaders in what they've achieved over the last few years. It's simply to assess how we can continue to develop and move forwards as an organisation and grasp the opportunities by building capacity and resilience where necessary. The recommendations that we have are that Cabinet considers the contents of the report and that delegated authority be given to the Head of Human Resources and Organisational Development in consultation with the leader to formally appoint a consultation to undertake a review of the Council's senior management arrangements as set out in the body of this report, that the report be referred to Scrutiny Committee, Corporate Performance and Resources for consideration, and that the findings and assessment of any recommended changes to the senior management structure are subject to a further report to Cabinet and, if appropriate, Council before the end of 2021. Now, I'm not actually going to move those recommendations just yet. I know, Ben, you've got your hand up. Is there any points of clarification that we need to ask Tracy for before we make a decision on this? No, everyone's happy with that. So, Tracy, you can at this point leave.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Right, that's fine. And so therefore, those are the recommendations. I would so move. And if there are any comments, I know Ben and Eddie, you've got your hands up. If we go to Ben first.
Yeah, thank you. And as for understanding and for the benefit of people who don't work within the council, Tracy's head of HR and has a role to do with developing this report, and as is detailed in the report, and actually conducted that briefing for group leaders. And I think it's important to understand this is about a whole council appreciation of where we need to go. I second the recommendations, and I do so with the knowledge I've no preconceived ideas as to what any future structure would look like, and I'm really keen to understand what comes out of this process, and I know through WLGA that there are a number of councils going through similar exercises in understanding how their structures should fit, what they're being expected to do now, and you briefly alluded to it, Liz, didn't you, with regards to changes coming up with regard to how local government's organised and so forth. So I don't have any preconceived ideas of what the structure should look like. I don't have an opinion on negative or positive as to what could change, and I recognise that the public's view of councils may include an idea of lots of management, but actually what we've seen is lots of people working really hard during the pandemic, and maybe a review like this will help us shine a light on where perhaps we need to refocus certain areas in order to meet those new challenges. And so I think it's really important to reflect that there may well be people who need to understand a bit further our thinking on this before we move forward, and that's why I say that I don't think any of us here have a preconceived idea as to what that structure would look like. So I do second recommendations. I think it'd be a really important piece of work, and I think the stuff that follows is going to be really important too, and how we engage the whole council in this approach. And I have no doubt that it'll end up going to council for any kind of approval if the sort of structural change that may be required it comes forward. So with that, I second it. Thank you.
Super. Thanks, Ben. And over to Eddie.
Often after I come to put my hand up after Ben, I think, well, he's covered everything I want to say. So it's in general terms, yes, fully concur with what's just been said. We know there's with the legislation and the scope for looking at what we do, and you know what, we need to know why we're such a successful council, and just it'll identify those aspects of it as well. So let's just see what results. I often wonder about consultants. You're bringing people in to ask you the questions that you already know the answers to. But I don't think on this case it's more open. As put in the report, is to be more objective. Often you can be limited by your own perceptions and constraints of what you think should be there. This is an opportunity for an external organisation to assess that and come up with whatever proposals they come up with. So look forward to that. Okay, and I won't put my hand up after Ben again.
Well, no, I'll just ask you first if we do this again. But so that's super. Everybody is moved, seconded. Everyone in agreement? Super. Well, I have no urgent items and I don't have anything under part 2. So at that point, I will thank everyone for their attendance. And this is our first live streamed cabinet meeting. And this is in effect the future from now on for council committees and cabinet. So hopefully we'll see everyone again in the not too distant future. Thank you all.